Welcome to another First Dakota National Bank AgriVisions program. Today we're going to be focusing on Keep Farmers Farming with Alan Hoyer. I'm your host, Nate Franzine, President of Ag Banking. So we talked about communication and some of the challenges you'll come across in the process.
Sure.
Along those lines, I think of maybe some others that I've observed you work through with families along the way. How about ownership versus compensation, for example?
Yeah, interesting, and it's a concept we really have to work on in agriculture, because you look at ownership and compensation are two different things. Ownership is about equity. You have an ownership interest, shares, ownership, that's the equity. Compensation is about living. People need to live. If you work for an organization, as I work for First Dakota, I don't have an equity position here. I don't have any ownership in the bank, so it's not about equity. It is about compensation. It's about living. At the same time, people that work for an organization are trying to build some individual wealth through their compensation side, which ultimately builds equity. But in agriculture, we're putting so much pressure on equity that we're willing to really not have that compensation conversation or the level it should be had. And so we have people, I've never seen anybody sell land to buy diapers, right? I've seen plenty of people work second and third jobs to really put food on the table and buy diapers because they're so concerned about equity. So ownership interests and compensation are two different things, and we need to address both. If we get the compensation piece right, that makes some of the other conversation about how do I buy land in the future, because you're building some wealth here. There's strategies that can be deployed only if we have both of them in the right perspective and dealing with both of them. And it takes a while for people to grasp that concept. But overall, once it starts kicking in, a lot of the growing pains begin to take care of themselves. And it's an important point that I feel like I've discovered that out there and put words behind it. I just thought everybody had that figured out when I got into this thing, because we did. I work for organizations. I want to make sure everybody had a career opportunity. I want to make sure Blake had a career opportunity at our place. And that was a real eye-opener. But I also knew why that was putting a lot of pressure on a lot of pieces. People want to blame the spouse sometimes. That's unfair. Think of what that spouse is going through, trying to make ends meet when we got all this pressure and equity. We never dealt with compensation. There's a lot of pieces to it. Now, when I say compensation, it's a compensation package. Let's face the facts that on the farm, there's things that are actually money outlays, capital outlays from the operation that we need to recognize and acknowledge. If the operation is buying a vehicle for you, if the operation is paying all your utilities, your expenses, meat, you need to make sure we're writing all these things down as part of a package. Then, of course, part of that is what is that cash portion of the compensation package. And so it's not uncommon, and I've seen it's not uncommon to see 15 to 27,000 in fringe benefits. I see them out there. And again, that's going to be part of that compensation package. And so a lot of time needs to be spent around that, because equity shows up on a balance sheet.
Yep.
So we need to make sure we're doing the work on both sides. And it's critical on this too, is what is the financial system that we have in place? So we can not only to get this information transparent, but also that we can place any of the changes we intend to make against to make sure that we're profitable.
Yep.
But these conversations all head in that direction.
A lot of the family conflict that I've seen over the years comes at this issue you're talking about, right? If two brothers are farming together and they each have sons, and one son's getting compensated a lot differently than the other son, if that's not talked about or there's not reasoning behind it, that can be a source of a lot of friction. Yeah. That's just one example.
Sure.
But getting that right, no different than here at the bank, right? If we aren't paying our employees fairly and giving them fair packages, retirement packages, fringe benefits, the same things you're talking about, we're going to have a hard time retaining talent. We're going to have a hard time attracting talent. Yeah. And it's no different on the farm, right?
That's right. You used a word earlier on the podcast, leadership. Leadership has everything to do with everything we're talking about. If you're the head of your operation, if you're the parent or the grandparent, how you lead becomes the example in the future too. And how you don't lead becomes the example of the future too. Leadership is critical. This is all leadership stuff. Leading your family, leading your business. And we just have to get that right. And that's why sometimes you have to get the accountability and responsibility off your shoulders. You'll become a better leader.
Yeah.
And so it's all about that. No question.
Another question for you, Alan. I referred to you as a legacy consultant, which is what you are. That word legacy, we use it intentionally.
Yeah.
What's legacy mean?
Yeah, interesting question, because you can go to the dictionary and you can find a definition. We have to find a definition individually in every operation, because everybody has an opinion how that a word applies to their operation. And again, it comes back to peace. I think in general, people ask that question, I'll say I think legacy is we found success. And the operation may look different than when it did in the past to find that success. That's where we're getting some of the vision type work. And yet, if we can agree on that, well, then everything's back on the table. If they've already defined legacy, it only looks like this.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's our vision. Let's head down that path. But it's about finding a successful vision for their family, because things are changing. It's changing. And I'll go back to my grandfather. Way back in the 30s and the 40s and all that. That generation never intended for their children to be in business together. They just bought them all a farm. You think back, that's what happened. I run into that all the time when I ask for history on the operation. Yeah, in 1947, Grandpa bought 3 different farms. I mean, how applicable is that today? So by default of the economics and everything else, this keeping things unified, it tends to be the vision everybody believes has to happen. But do they want it to happen? And is there other options? I believe the future for a lot of operations is a level of fragmentation, but keeping a level of collaboration in place. So do we now have to own 2 combines instead of we really need 1? That can be success as well. So if legacy can be defined as we found a successful vision moving forward, I think that's where we need to be, and that's where people end up landing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good. As you get into these processes, Alan, with families, a lot of times part of the stress is we're looking for perfect.
Yeah.
We're trying to be perfect.
Yeah.
How do you view that and talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, interesting. I think we've all looked for perfect, and we think we're perfect in certain areas. I'm very imperfect myself. If I had to say imperfect in any place, it's how hard I try.
Yeah.
I believe I give it all. I'll be able to look back someday, I gave it all, but I sure made some mistakes along the way. And so people are looking for perfect in this transition world, and that's also what's causing a lot of problems, is we have to accept the fact that changes happen around us, and there's nothing perfect about transition. I actually had a family tell me one time, and it was in the initial meeting, he said, "I'll bet just everything's hunky-dory at your house, isn't it?" And I said, it's not hunky-dory at all, but I'm not looking for perfect, I'm looking for transition. And by the way, that's critical to find transition. Don't try to find perfect, because you're going to be very miserable along the way.
Yeah. I think that's such good advice, and on many levels, right? In transition, even in the estate plan, right?
Yeah.
You put that legal structure in place, and at that point in time you finish it, it makes perfect sense to you.
Yeah.
Years go on and years go by and things change and the business grows, and you kind of need to revisit that estate plan once in a while too, maybe, right?
Yeah, great point. I mean, when we're focused on estate planning, I tell people, think about the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Don't try to anticipate 20 years from now, because we just don't know. But if you can make some decisions. If something would happen to us over the next 5 years, people can plan for that. And then again, getting the foundation in place of an estate plan is where the work is. It's not the amendment, it's not the codicil, it's not the changes. Those are so easy. But getting the foundation in place. And think about 5 years, Don't try to think about 20 and 30 years.